A cafe can be full of customers and still be losing money. That sounds impossible, but the reason is hidden in something most customers never see. A cafe doesn't make money simply because it sells coffee. It makes money when the money coming through the door is greater than the cost of keeping the entire operation alive. And that difference can be surprisingly small because a cafe is not really a coffee business. It is a business built around space, time, and repetition.
At 6:30 in the morning, the cafe opens. The espresso machine is switched on. The lights come on. The refrigerators are running. Employees arrive. The rent is already being paid for another day, and nobody has bought anything yet. The cafe is losing money before the first latte is poured. Not literally in every accounting sense, but economically, the clock has started. Every minute the doors remain open creates costs, and those costs don't wait for customers. This is the first hidden mechanism. Fixed costs create a race against time.
Now a customer walks in. A latte costs $5. To the customer, that's the transaction. But for the cafe, the transaction is only the beginning. Coffee beans cost money. Milk costs money. The cup costs money. The employee making the drink costs money. The card payment may cost money. And after all of that, the cafe still has rent, insurance, equipment, maintenance, utilities, taxes, and other overhead. So the $5 isn't profit, it's revenue. And that distinction is where the entire business model begins. Because the real question isn't, how much does a coffee cost? It's, how much does each sale contribute toward keeping this place alive? Now, watch what happens next. The customer looks at the pastry display. A croissant, $4. Suddenly, the same visit is worth more. This is one of the most important ideas in retail. The cafe has already paid a large part of the cost of acquiring that customer. The location is already there. The employee is already working. The lights are already on. The customer is already standing at the counter. So the second purchase can be disproportionately valuable. Not because the pastry is magical, because the infrastructure is already being used. And this is why cafes sell much more than coffee. There is an even bigger variable: time. Imagine a cafe with 30 seats. At 8 a.m., they're full. At 10 a.m., half are empty. At 2 p.m., almost nobody is there. The rent hasn't changed. The espresso machine hasn't stopped depreciating. The electricity bill hasn't disappeared. But the opportunity to generate revenue from that space has. This is the invisible cost of unused capacity. And unlike inventory, unused capacity can't be stored. You can't save an empty seat from Tuesday and sell it on Wednesday. Once the hour is gone, the opportunity is gone with it. This is why location can completely change the economics. A cafe on a busy street might pay far more rent than one on a quiet road. At first, that looks like a disadvantage. But the expensive location may buy something much more valuable: access to customers. Every person walking past is another opportunity to convert expensive space into revenue. The building hasn't become cheaper. It has simply become more productive. And suddenly, rent isn't just an expense. It's a bet. A bet that enough economic activity will pass through that address to justify the price. Then, psychology makes the machine even more powerful. A $5 purchase doesn't feel like a serious financial decision. That's why people rarely analyze every coffee the way they would analyze a $500 purchase. The smaller the payment feels, the easier it becomes to repeat. And repetition is where the real value appears. One coffee is a sale. A coffee every weekday is a habit. A habit is something much closer to recurring revenue.
The cafe no longer needs to convince the customer from zero every morning. The routine does part of the work.
But this creates another problem. More customers sound like the obvious answer until the cafe gets busy. Then the constraints appear. There are only so many seats, only so many employees, only so much counter space, only so many drinks the equipment can produce during the morning rush. At some point, adding customers doesn't automatically mean adding profit. The system has reached capacity, and now the business has to become more efficient rather than simply busier. This is the part customers almost never see.
Because the real asset of a cafe isn't the coffee machine. It isn't even the brand. It's the ability to repeatedly turn a limited physical space into economic activity. A seat can produce revenue. A table can produce revenue. A kitchen can produce revenue. A morning rush can produce revenue. And when the same resources generate revenue in different ways throughout the day, the economics change again. Coffee in the morning, food around lunch, perhaps delivery, perhaps catering, perhaps an evening event. The goal is not simply to sell more products. It is to make the existing machine useful for more of the day.
And this brings us back to the $5 latte. The customer sees a drink. The owner sees a small contribution toward a much larger structure: rent, labor, equipment, utilities, waste, taxes, and the thousands of tiny costs required to keep a physical business operating. That is why a crowded cafe isn't automatically a profitable cafe, and why an expensive coffee isn't automatically an expensive business. The real economics are hidden underneath the transaction. The cafe is selling coffee, but underneath the coffee, it is selling something else: the productive use of space and time. Every hour the machine runs, the question is the same. How much economic value can this space create before the clock runs out? Because in a cafe, the coffee may be what customers buy, but time is what the business is really trying to monetize.
Welcome to your financial future. Together we can build your fund. Let's track your progress. Subscribe now and let's get started. Just click the button today.